Thank you for that, Marianne. And we spoke with Joanne earlier, and Joanne's back. Joanne, we're going to have you unmute. Sounds like you may have another question for Marianne. So Joanne, again, if you can unmute yourself. Am I wrong? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, hi. I really didn't have another question. I don't know how my hand got up. Sorry.
Well, we're all rooting for you, Joanne. I can tell you that.
That's right.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And so with that, Marianne Williamson, we do have one more question. Let's see. It is David. David, if you'd go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, hello?
Hi.
Hi, Marianne. Thanks for taking my question. Okay, I was listening back and forth about the political climate. People didn't like Trump, Biden, all this stuff. I understand that there's a lot of division here. But one thing I'm curious about is that you mentioned about these corporate interests. And I know obviously under Trump, people didn't like it, but under previous presidents, regardless on which side of the aisle people are on, it seems to be that the corporations generally, like Big Agri, Big Pharma, always have some kind of control over the election process and over politics. So if we're talking about, let's say, more people should use love as a tool, let's say, but if there's so much hatred out there there was so much hatred for Trump, Republicans, conservatives, and then this hatred for one side for the other. And that hatred is very palpable. I saw it more in this election cycle than I did in 2016. And then I did back in 2000 when Bush versus Gore. It seems to be very palpable. And there's a lot of angry people. There's a lot of protesting. People are upset about inequalities that are taking place. They want to even things out. But from my point of view, it just seems to me that that the players at the top, these large corporations, always remain the same. And it's just a matter of, let's say, the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And it's a matter of, people are kind of pawns on a chessboard. You claim one problem, fix another. Like, for example, in New York City, you say, obviously we want policing to be better. And, we feel that maybe there's racism, whether there is or isn't. The number of shootings here in New York City is way up. And in the very areas of places where they want to make equality, the people in those areas are getting shot at rates that we haven't seen in many years. And it just seems to me that it's always even at the top. And they use the kind of, I don't want to call people pawns, but by sowing discord between people, it allows the people at the top to continue doing what they're doing and saying, well, we really want to help you. We're trying our best, even though for the last 50 years, they've been saying in New York City, we want equality, and problems are still there. But I wanted to hear your take on the top versus like I said, in informed citizenry, all the top interests versus the citizenry. I believe the top is playing to the ear, saying, yes, we hear you, we want to change things, and they don't. Okay. And what happens is you had a lot of protests, and there is achievements, but there's also destruction.
Okay. Between World War II and 1980, America built an extraordinary middle class. In the 1970s, the average American had a good job with good benefits, could own a home, could own a car, could take a yearly vacation, could send their kids to school, to college. That was the average American worker in the 1970s. And we had a very different tax structure. We had far greater taxes for the very, very richest among us. And there were national governmental programs such as building the highway system that were not seen as socialist left-wing craziness, but were just seen as government doing its job. I remind you that the president, when all that was happening in the 1950s, was a Republican, Dwight Eisenhower. It was in 1980 that there was elected a president who introduced the notion of trickle-down economics. The notion that the primary responsibility of the corporation should be fiduciary financial responsibility to its stockholders at the expense of other stakeholders. That the most important thing was to increase stockholder value, and that would lead to squeezing money from the worker. It would lead to a diminished sense of responsibility to the workers, to the community, and to the planet itself, which should be considered the other stakeholders. What was presented to people was that this was good because these stockholders would become job creators and the money would trickle down and lift all boats. Now, after 40 years, it's clear, the jury's in after 40 years, trickle down economics did not lift all boats. It actually left millions and millions and millions of people without even a life vest. And it caused a massive transfer of wealth into the hands of 1% of Americans who now control more wealth than the bottom 90%. Now, whenever you have, so what happened was we went from being a society where no matter who was in charge, whether it was Democrats or Republicans, there was a general sense that we should try to make this country a land of equal opportunity, that everybody would basically have a fair shot. And if you're in the club in America, it's a great place to be. The point is, not enough people can now get into the club. When you have tens of millions of children who go to schools where they don't even have the adequate school supplies to teach a child to read. If a child cannot learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased, the chances of incarceration are drastically increased. Then what started to happen in the 90s was this incredible explosion of the undue influence of money on our system. So starting in the 80s, it started with the Republicans, but it did not slow down. It slowed down, but did not stop with the Democrats. So by this point, it's this duopoly where, in my opinion, certainly the Republicans are a lot worse, but that doesn't mean the Democrats are pure, because the Republicans, the Republican Party has been taken over hook, line, and sinker by this corporatist mentality. The Democrats contain two elements. On the other hand, there are some corporate interests where both are so beholden to the money from those corporate interests that, as you said, corporations, our system of government has become a system of legalized bribery, where too many public policies do more to increase the short-term profits for huge corporate interests than to increase safety, health, and well-being of people and planet. Now, about the second thing, let me just complete by saying this. It's not, no intelligent observer would argue that we never had racists and we never had anti-Semites and we never had homophobes and we never had Islamophobes or xenophobes. Of course, we're not enlightened people, so obviously we've always had elements of serious bigotry and racism in the United States. However, back in the 60s, we thought we had reached a point in the 50s and the 60s where there was a general consensus on both left and right that no serious bigot, racist, et cetera, would be given a serious megaphone by either major political party. And those levees have fallen. And they fell for two reasons. Number one, the advent of social media, where even a Nazi can have a platform now. And the fact that we had a president, a person of political, no matter what. I mean, I've made it clear that I don't agree with Ronald Reagan. I didn't agree with George Bush about the Iraq War, but neither one of those people would have knowingly stoked racism, anti-Semitism, homophobia, et cetera. It's just, this wasn't done. There was a center on which we all agreed to agree. And we have now been through the experience of a personage of no less power than the President of the United States, who would actually exploit those sentiments for political purposes. We were a wounded nation because of it. And it's like the box has been opened. And these forces have just been spewed into our system. And it all goes back to what I said before. Many different problems, one answer. And that's really takes us full circle to what we said. If each of us will see this, if each of us will do what we can in our own lives as responsible citizens, but also as people seeking to increase love, then, as we were saying to the nice Australian lady, it can't take many years. We don't have many years. It can't be many years. It has to be now. We have to consider the decline of America as an emergency situation, as a crisis. Other generations before us have risen to the occasion. Slavery was followed by abolition. The institutionalized suppression of women was followed by the women's suffragette movement. Institutionalized white supremacy and segregation in the American South was followed by the civil rights movement. And now it's our turn. Other generations rose to the occasion, and I join with all of you the absolute conviction that we can and we will too.